Imagine a company larger than Apple, Google, and Amazon combined. This corporation owns entire cities and commands a private army twice the size of the British Empire's military. It collects taxes from whole nations. We are talking about the British East India Company, the most ambitious and dangerous business venture in history. It began with a few sacks of pepper and ended by controlling the destinies of millions. For over 2 centuries, it was effectively a state within a state. It waged wars, toppled emperors, and redrew the world map, all for the sake of shareholder profit. Today, we learn how a handful of London-based traders brought entire subcontinents under their rule. It all began on December 31st, 1600. On that day, Queen Elizabeth I signed a charter granting a group of London merchants a monopoly on trade with the East. At the time, England was a minor player on the global stage. The seas were ruled by the Spanish and Portuguese, and later, the Dutch. The company's first expeditions were incredibly risky. Half the ships might never return due to storms or pirates, but those that did brought back spices worth more than gold. Pepper, cloves, and nutmeg were the oil of the 17th century. Shareholders saw profits of hundreds of percent, but the market was crowded and competition was brutal. To survive, the company had to learn not just how to trade, but how to fight. Gradually, trading posts became fortified strongholds. Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta became the corporation's first strategic hubs. From that moment on, commerce and militarism became inseparable. The company realized if you control the land, you control the price. By the mid-18th century, the company was no longer just a group of traders. It had become a complex administrative machine. Most incredible of all was its military force. The company had its own army of 260,000 men, double the size of the entire British regular army at the time. Most of these soldiers were local mercenaries known as sepoys, commanded by British officers loyal not to the crown but to the board of directors. Imagine a modern corporation like Tesla owning its own aircraft carriers and divisions. It sounds insane, but in the 18th century, it was the norm. The East India Company could declare war on any Indian prince. It signed international treaties in its own name. It even minted its own currency, accepted across Asia. Lobbying in London reached such heights that a quarter of the members of parliament owned company stock. The corporation had literally bought itself political cover. Now, nothing could hold it back. The real turning point came in 1757, the Battle of Plassey. The ambitious and ruthless Robert Clive led the company's forces against the Nawab of Bengal. Clive wasn't a brilliant strategist, but he was a master of intrigue. He simply bribed a large portion of the enemy's army. Victory at Plassey gave the company control over India's wealthiest province, Bengal. This was the moment the merchant officially became the sovereign. In 1765, the company secured the Diwani, the right to collect taxes. It was a gold mine. They no longer needed to bring silver from Europe to buy goods. Instead, they took money from the locals and used that same money to buy tea and silk for sale in London. It was the perfect heist. Company profits skyrocketed, but for the people of India, it was the beginning of a catastrophe. Corporate greed knew no bounds. In 1770, famine struck Bengal. It started with a crop failure, but the company's actions turned a crisis into an apocalypse. Instead of lowering taxes or distributing grain, the company continued to demand payment. They even raised taxes to compensate for the loss of revenue from the dying population. As a result, approximately 10 million people perished. 1/3 of the province's population simply vanished. Meanwhile, shareholders in London continued to receive their dividends. To the directors, people were just lines in a ledger. Clive was later tried in England for corruption, but he defended himself by saying he showed extraordinary reserve, considering how much more he could have stolen. India began its transformation from a global manufacturing center to a raw materials supplier. The legendary Indian textile industry was systematically dismantled. The company imposed prohibitive duties on Indian cloth in Britain while flooding the Indian market with duty-free English fabrics. It was a textbook case of the forced destruction of a competitor's economy. India grew rapidly poor, while London was built on its wealth. The company's ambitions didn't stop at India. China was the next target. The British were obsessed with tea, but the Chinese would only accept silver as payment. To solve this, the company began illegally smuggling opium from India into China, turning an entire nation into addicts to balance the trade deficit. Simultaneously, the company's influence reached America. The famous Boston Tea Party was specifically a protest against the East India Company's monopoly. American colonists didn't want to pay taxes to a corporation that dictated their terms. You could say that this company's greed indirectly led to the birth of the United States. Its geographical reach was truly planetary. Such immense power inevitably led to rot. Company employees on the ground were incredibly corrupt, amassing huge fortunes through private deals. They were called nabobs, nouveau riche, returning to England with fabulous wealth. Inside the company, management was chaotic. Massive military spending began to outweigh trade profits. Several times, the company teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, and each time the British government was forced to bail it out. It became what we call too big to fail. The government realized that such a monster could not be left in private hands. Parliament began to strip away the company's autonomy, appointing government overseers and gradually ending its trade monopoly. By the mid-18th century, the company had become a bloated, bureaucratic machine. But the final blow didn't come from London. In 1857, India exploded. The Sepoy Mutiny, or the First War of Independence, shocked the world. The very mercenaries who upheld the company's power turned their guns on their masters. The reasons were deep-seated, ranging from religious disrespect to economic exploitation. The war was brutal on both sides. It took the company a year to suppress the rebellion with the help of regular British royal troops. After that, the British government decided enough is enough. In 1858, the Act for the Better Government of India was passed. The East India Company was effectively nationalized. All its territories and its army were transferred to the direct control of the British Crown. Thus began the era of the British Raj. Officially, the company existed until 1874, when it was finally dissolved. In its final days, only a few clerks remained in the office. The history of the corporate takeover of the world had come to an end.